All right, good morning, everybody. And we are going to continue our exploration of the 10th chapter of the Mesilas Yesharim, Path of the Just. And we're going to jump back in where we were. If you remember, we're in this chapter 10, the chapter that deals with what's called Nikius. And Nikius is, and I got a little feedback last week that maybe Nikius is slightly intimidating or slightly has a feeling of maybe being a little bit overwhelming. And I think the reason for that is because the way I've been describing it up until now is taking where we're at, taking our achievements and our accomplishments Jewishly, spiritually, and sifting them through an even finer sifter and refining them and elevating them and developing them and fine-tuning them even more. And I think when people hear that, they might think like, whoa. I mean, I'm pretty good with like where I'm at and what I'm doing, and I'm not sure I really want to like bump it up to the next level of really taking it to like a super granular level of focus on my observance. So I understand that, and that makes sense. I think that makes sense to all of us. But I would say is that as we move on in this chapter, and this section of Nikius, really the next chapter 11, which details it, is the longest chapter in the book. It's actually very relevant, and people think that it might be like a little bit too esoteric or too high of a level. The truth is that it's you'll see as we get deeper into it that it's actually very relatable and very relevant, maybe even the most relevant section of the entire book, because it's where we go, like I said before, we go a little granular. Huh?
Granular.
We go granular. Thank you, Jeff. We go granular on some of the issues, like, for example, envy, or just anger. We look into some of the the details of haughtiness. That's Nikius when it comes to character traits. We also talk about Nikius when it comes to falsehood and honesty and precision in how we use our word and how we give our word. Revenge, hatred, lashon hara, rechilus, all of these areas, giving advice. These are really practical areas of Jewish life, and this is where we start to go deeply into those areas. So I wouldn't get overwhelmed. Stick with us, because we'll see that this subject of Nikius is going to be very relevant. Nikius when it comes to the food that we eat, and Nikius when it comes to the company that we keep, and relationships, sexual relationships, and all of these things which are very relevant to our kind of our daily life are all going to start to come up in this section. So hang in there with me as we go through this. Okay, so we're on page 166. And now we're going to try to give a couple of Talmudic sources to underscore or to highlight this notion of Nikius, which is again subtle. It's a much more fine-tuned and subtle approach to our mitzvah observance. So he says over here, we're on the bottom of 166, and this is similar to that which the sages of blessed memory said, that the sins of a person that a person tramples on with his heels surround him at the time of judgment. Now, what are the sins that a person tramples on with his heels? So these are things that we don't attach much significance to. There are things that we tend to blow off because we assume that they're not that important, or they're just sort of part of daily life, regular life that everybody sort of, everybody does this. In my business, in my field, it might not be that kosher, to do things this way, but everybody does it this way. It's just sort of an unwritten rule that everybody sort of fudges in this way or cheats a little bit in this way. And Nikios means that those areas where everybody tramples on, those areas where people just, they take it too lightly. They don't attach the gravity and the seriousness to it that it deserves. These are things where we can come along and excel. These are the areas that can sort of, if you pardon the phrase, but separate the men from the boys, right? This is where you can really excel and take it up a notch in who you are, in your ethics, in your moral behavior, in your spiritual approach to life, right? And that's what we want. We don't want to be mediocre. We want to be, I'm last week, it was Sunday, I think, maybe. Did I mention this? I went to a funeral of a very close friend of mine's grandfather. And this man was the way they spoke about him, I'm still very moved by it. And, and I kept asking myself, like, what are they going to say about me? This happens to me every time I go to a funeral, a moving funeral anyway, like a good funeral. Sometimes you go to a funeral and they're like, my dad was, he was a good golfer, not to take anything away from the game of golf, of course, but if that's all that your kids are saying about you at the funeral, then you read between the lines and this guy must have been a piece of work, because the best thing the kids can come up with to say about him at his funeral is that he played a good game of golf. Okay. But when you go to a funeral that's deeply inspiring because the person that they're speaking about was a wonderful father, a wonderful grandfather, a wonderful member of the community, contributive part of society in meaningful ways, it moves you and inspires you. Right. So we all want to upgrade. We all want to bring our A game. We all want to improve our approach to our relationships with other people, our relationships with Hashem, our spirituality, our Torah learning, our wisdom, our knowledge, our midos, all these things. And Nikias is where you can take it up to that next level. It's where you can find one place where you can really shine, where they'll say about you, he really, really, this was his mitzvah. This was the area that he really hit it out of the park. He was incredibly encouraging in the way he spoke to other people. Or I never once heard him get angry or say a word of lashon hara. Whatever it is, that's the level of nikius. That's excellence. That's excelling on a professional level. That's professional Judaism. And that's what nikius is about. And he says that there are many mitzvos that people they sort of trample on with their heels because we just don't really attach any true value to them, because in the world they're cheap. Nobody seems to really value these things. You go out with your friends and everyone's speaking lashon hara, trash talking, the third friend who didn't show up, or whatever it is. And that's what people do. And that's how things go. And in my business, okay, I'm not the most scrupulous guy, but nobody is in my business. Everybody, cuts these corners. Those are the mitzvahs that people trample on. And Nikiya says, whoa, those are the areas where you are going to define your greatness. Those are the areas where people are going to say about you, he wasn't like everybody else, because he really, really, truly got it. And he excelled in this area. So that's what this is about. On the top of 167, in the same vein, the sages of blessed memory said, most people stumble in matters of theft, a minority of them in illicit relationships, and all of them in the dust of evil speech. Let me explain that sentence, okay? The Talmud goes ahead and tells us that when it comes to theft, okay, so let's see, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's about 16 of us, okay, on this call. So according to the Talmud, most people stumble in the matters of theft, okay? That means 9 people on this call And I'm not asking for anyone to show hands now, but 9 of us are ganavs. Okay. If anyone wants to, Jeff, we got one person who admitted to being a ganav. Okay. We don't need the details, but we have, what does that mean? We're thieves? Most of us are thieves? I don't know any thieves. I don't hang out with anyone who's a thief. I don't like thieves. What does it mean most of us are thieves? What do you think?
We don't.
David? Oops, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I think that maybe we steal things like time from people, and maybe sometimes we're stealing inadvertently, not really calling it theft.
Amazing. So I think you're 100% right. Can you give me an example, like a real life example that comes to mind of, like, let's say either one of those? I think those are 2 different things. They're stealing time and then they're stealing inadvertently. Does something come to mind, an example of real life? Not something that you've done, of course, Doris, because we know you wouldn't do it. Maybe that Ron did. No, I'm kidding. So,
okay. Well, probably anything having to do with sales. In a lot of different areas, whether it's, I don't know, shopping around for insurance or big box appliances, perhaps while you're shopping around getting prices, maybe you don't really have the intent of going with the one that gave you the estimate, but you're just doing it for your own information.
Okay.
And you're going, and your intent is to go somewhere else.
Rabbi Began? Oh.
Yes. Yes.
It's Lee. I was going to say something really mundane.
Okay.
And that is, I think when we're late, when we show up late, it seems like it's completely inconsequential, but ultimately we're wasting someone else's time. We're not showing them the respect by showing up on time at a designated period. And I don't know if that qualifies for what you're talking about.
That's absolutely. So let's take both of those examples, because those are 2 perfect examples, right? Those are okay. So first, let's take Doris's example. Doris's example is, and I think we all do this unless we're very, very aware and careful not to. But think about, I've done this before. There's by the way a way to make it okay. But you want to buy something. You want to buy it on Amazon. You want to buy I don't know what, an MP3 player, or you want to buy a set of headphones, or you want to buy a dishwasher, a washing machine. So you walk into, or you don't want to buy it without seeing it. So you walk into Best Buy. So now, if you don't use any of the salespeople there, if you just go in on your own, that's fine. The store's open, go look around. But if you're taking the time of a salesperson, and that all you want to do is look at it, find the best one, and then you're going to go buy it somewhere else where it's cheaper, on app or on Amazon or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's Doris's example. That's not okay. Now, if your mindset is, if they'll match my price, I'll buy it there. Or if I find something that I like, maybe I would buy it there, then it's perfectly fine. And it's up to them to sell it to you and to make you a good deal and offer you a good price. But if you know that that's not your intention at all, that's not okay. Now, what you could do is you could say to the salesperson, hey, I just want to be totally honest with you up front. I'm not planning on buying anything. I'm not planning on buying this item. I just want to look at it. But if you're willing to help me, that'd be great. And if they do, that's fine. Okay. But Doris's example is a very good example. That's called stealing time. And Lee's example is also a great example. It's not mundane at all. It's something, it is mundane in the sense that we all do it and don't think a lot about it, but that's exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about the mitzvahs that we trample on with our heels. They surround us. Everyone's 5 minutes late. When you say I'm there at 12, it means I'll be there between 12 Jewish time, 12:15. But no, that's not okay. Somebody's there. If that person is going to show up at 12 and you show up at 12:15 or even 12:05, like you said, Lee, you're taking time away from that person. That person, you're stealing time from that person, and that's not okay. And look, it happens sometimes that you're late, but you can't, if you have to be somewhere at 12:10 and it takes 12 minutes and it takes 10 minutes to get there, you can't leave at 12:10. You gotta, minutes matter. I'm working on this in my house. # minutes matter. right? You gotta work backwards. If I have to be somewhere at a certain time, you got to know what time you have to leave the house to get there, and you got to leave at that time. And if you're not, and if you're just cavalier about it, you're stealing someone's time. That's not okay. Yeah, good examples. Perfect. Okay. So that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about most people steal. Now, another way that people steal, I think most people steal, is little tiny things that no one thinks about that everybody does. You're in the office. I mean, no one really works in an office anymore, but back in the days when there used to be these things called offices that people used to go work in, there might be a photocopy machine there. That's for people to use in the office. And maybe you have something personal that you want to copy. So you go and you make a few copies of, you use the photocopier. Now, if it's clearly stated that employees are allowed to use the photocopy machine at their own discretion for their own personal use, that's fine, no problem. But if it's not, then that's stealing. Oh, come on. I'm working for a company, a $50 billion company. You think it really makes a difference, the 4-cent photocopy? Probably not, but that doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that that's called stealing unless there's permission to do it. So we all have little subtle ways that we are stealing. And the Talmud says it. The Talmud calls it out. Most of us are thieves. Most of us are thieves. How many thieves do you know already? But if you understand that a thief is doesn't have to be someone who's breaking into houses at night, or someone who's robbing people on the street or stealing cars. Thieves can be people that show up a little late for a meeting, or somebody who, maybe you're not quiet in your home when somebody's sleeping. And then you wake them up before their alarm clock is supposed to go off, and you may have stolen 15, 20 minutes of their sleep. And that person might be somebody who's very careful with their sleep. I remember Rabbi Noah Weinberg of blessed memory, our Rabbi, our teacher. Say hi to Rabbi Noah Weinberg over here. Okay. He once told us that when it comes to sleep, a person should figure out, and you can figure this out, exactly how much sleep they need. Okay. And how do you figure it out? You start by getting 8 hours of sleep, and then you do that for a week, and then you cut it down to 7 hours and 50 minutes, and then you cut it down to 7 hours and 40 minutes. And then when you get to the point where you're not functioning well, you say, okay, I have to add on a couple minutes. And then you figure out, I need 7.5 hours of sleep to function well. Okay, so some people are like this. I'm actually a little bit like this. My wife thinks I'm, a little type A when it comes to this, but I know how much sleep I need to get in order to function perfectly and ideally. So I go to sleep at a time, and I set my alarm for a time to make sure I get that amount of sleep. So if something happens, if there might be a night owl in the house who's not quiet, or somebody who wakes up early, that never happens before someone wakes up before me and is loud or whatever, that's called stealing sleep. That's, I see like all the husbands and wives are looking at each other over here, right? You got to be very careful with your spouse. If you're not on the same sleep schedule, right? If it be someone who wakes up super early and your husband stays up a little bit later and needs to sleep a little bit later, then you have to do your very best to be very quiet and not to wake him up. Okay, you have to be considerate, and that's called stealing. Okay, so most of us are guilty of that. A minority of people are guilty of illicit relationships, sexual immorality. Really? Come on. Okay, every once in a while, you meet somebody who might be cheating on his wife or whatever, but I mean, how many of we're cheating on our husband? How many of us really do that? How many of us are really involved in illicit sexual relationships? Well, it depends. If you define an illicit sexual relationship as having an affair or cheating on your spouse, then probably, very few, let's say, in our circles, hopefully. But if you consider having an illicit relationship, looking at inappropriate things on the internet, or having some kind of emotional connection with somebody that is a little bit inappropriate, and you have like a private secret person that you're texting with once in a while that your wife doesn't know about or whatever, you may never see her, you may not have any relation, but those are a level of illicit relationships. Those are on the Nikias level. When you go granular and you fine tune it and you look at it and you break it down more carefully and more specifically, an illicit relationship doesn't just mean I'm cheating on my spouse. It can mean something much more subtle than that. It can mean that there's a little bit too much emotional connection between me and somebody that I'm not supposed to have an emotional connection to, right? I introduced this idea to a friend of mine who is now divorced, and I had a pretty strong suspicion that his wife was having at least an emotional affair, meaning I didn't think that she was actually having an affair with somebody, but I had pretty good feeling that she was having a deep emotional, intimate relationship with another guy. And he's like, she's not cheating on me. She's not cheating on me, you know? Okay, so, and she probably wasn't. But once she was involved in this deep emotional relationship with this other person, she was not emotionally available for him on the same level, you know? And that's a degree of illicit relationships on the Nikios level. When we fine tune it, when we look a little bit more beyond the surface and into a deeper level, we can see that can also be a form of illicit relationships. And then the dust of evil speech. Okay, I might not be a Baal Lashon Hara. I might not be a guy who goes around saying, "Do you hear what he did? Do you hear what she did? This and that and that." Okay, no one can tolerate somebody like that. But there's unbelievable subtle ways that we can speak Lashon Hara without even speaking Lashon Hara sometimes. Sometimes just an eye roll, that says a million things. That says so much. You know, we give away our feelings about a person, or like, you know, what do you think about so-and-so? I met him the other day and great. Yeah, nice. That's called avak Lashon Hara. That's the dust of Lashon Hara. Okay. And he says, the Talmud says we all do that. We all do that. Okay. So am I a Lashon Hara guy? Am I a Baal Lashon Hara? Am I like this, you know, gossip monger or talebearer? No, of course not. I'm a rabbi. I would never do that. Am I guilty of avak Lashon Hara, dust Lashon Hara? Yes, I certainly am. Certainly am. All the time. Probably multiple times a day. If you look at it on the granular level and you go deeper. Okay, because due to its exceedingly subtle nature, all people stumble in the dust of evil speech to the extent that they do not recognize such speech as sin. Okay. It's an interesting example down below in note number 12. An example of the dust of Lashon Hara is praising someone in front of someone that you, let's say, I know Jeffrey doesn't like this guy very much. Okay. So I start praising him in front of Jeffrey. It's definitely going to elicit, not with Jeffrey, but with somebody who's not as refined as Jeffrey, it's likely to elicit some kind of like, it might elicit like, who are you kidding? This guy's the biggest jerk in the world. Or it might just elicit like, yeah, sure. Whatever. You know, whatever. You know, so that's a form of avak Lashon Hara. Just praising somebody in front of somebody else when you know that person doesn't like that person. That not even the person who says the whatever, but the guy who elicits the whatever is on a level, on a subtle level, on a Nikias level, guilty of Lashon Hara. Okay?
Rabbi,
Yes.
It's Hannah. I have a question. So one thing that I always wonder is, let's say you are with a group of people and a friend, and that friend is lying, okay? And you know they're lying, which is stealing. Are you supposed to tell, like, oh, what are you talking about? Or are you just supposed to let it go? It's always bothered me because, you know, I'm sure we've all been in those situations where, you know, the person is lying. So what do you think?
Well, I think it highly depends on a lot more sort of details of the situation. If they're lying in a way that's relatively harmless and no one's going to get hurt by it, that might be one thing. Let's say they're boasting about themselves and they're like, oh yeah, and I have a house in Hawaii, and I own a condo in Alaska, and I have 4 yachts or whatever. Like, and they're lying, but like it's not hurting anyone or affecting anyone or causing any negative, then maybe you don't say anything. If they're lying in a way where they're misleading somebody who's likely to be harmed or damaged by it, then it's a very different set of circumstances. Also, if you do feel the need to say something, do you say it to them privately alone, or who do you have to inform about it? So, it really depends on the details of the situation. So it's hard to answer that in a sort of general sense, but if you had a very specific example, we could try to break it down a little bit and analyze it. But yeah, it really depends. It really depends a lot. Generally, you don't want to embarrass somebody in public. So if there's a way to do it privately, that's always preferable. Also, if you don't think the person is going to be interested at all in your rebuke or your whatever the words are, your constructive criticism, and then there's less of a reason to say something to them, because they're probably not going to listen to you anyway. So there's a lot of factors that go into those types of decisions. Not simple.
Yeah. Thank you. That's how I feel. Thank you.
Yeah. Complicated, right? Okay. Any other thoughts about this sort of like very, very subtle way of looking? Even when you just think about this, you start to like, you don't want to make yourself crazy, and you don't want to go over the top, and you don't want to constantly be, neurotic and thinking and rethinking and overthinking everything you say and everything you do and but you do at the same time want to have a degree of awareness and self-awareness, right? I mean, that's one of the rarer commodities, people that are self-aware, people that so often we meet people that don't seem to have any self-awareness. They don't even realize what they're doing. They don't even realize what they're saying. They don't even realize the harm that they're causing or the damage that's being done. And being self-aware and being able to, be objective and ask yourselves, like, did I handle that situation correctly? Did I need to say this? Should I have handled it differently? Should I have said something else? Looking at things carefully and going through them and sifting through them with that level of focus and intensity is what Nikios is all about.
David?
Yes. There's
so many levels, though, of Lashon Hara, and also the Chafetz Chaim makes exceptions. Like if someone's exploring a shidduch, and some very negative things about this person, you're obligated to say.
Totally.
Right.
100%.
And also, if someone's going into business with somebody or giving somebody a loan and their background's being investigated, and this guy has reneged on a loan to you or maybe worked for you and stolen, and that's been proven, you have the right to tell this person if you're trying to help this person prevent getting snookered, not necessarily because you hate this person and want to get them in trouble with the problem of a parnassus.
Right. So there are absolutely a whole bunch of there's a whole bunch of details and laws and things that go into knowing how to deal with Lashon Hara and handling Lashon Hara in situations. So yeah, I think that you have to be aware of these things, and you have to know some of the details and familiarize yourself with the laws, because they're very, very complicated. And there are times that you absolutely are supposed to and have to say something, and then there's some times where you're not allowed to say something very, very detailed, and yet there's a lot to know and how to handle those situations,
including between spouses, that a certain amount, as I understand, is allowed if it's going to help your spouse in deal with an emotional situation. Now, it can't. You have hear it out, try to settle things down, and that's the end of it. But it's not like, don't tell me this, And if it's really upsetting your spouse, as I understood it, you can talk about it.
Right, right. So yeah. I mean, these are let's leave the details of the laws of Lashon Hara for a different share. But yes, you're right. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's important to know. And if you don't know, you have to ask somebody who knows. Okay. Good. So let's move on a little bit. We're in the middle of 167. Our sages speak of David HaMelech's mastery of this trait and what he merited as a result. Okay. At this point, by this point, you must realize how much the Ramchal loves David HaMelech. I mean, David is his man. He's always turning to David for Tehillim is his first place to turn for proof texts for everything he says. He's always interested in David HaMelech's approach to all of the topics and all the character traits that are discussed. So here, as is his custom, he turns to David HaMelech, and he says the sages of blessed memory said that David HaMelech was vigilant and would cleanse himself entirely from all of these subtle sins that most people trampled underfoot. And therefore, he would go to war against his enemies with absolute trust that he would be victorious. And this is what he says. David says this in Psalms. He reflects this idea of his commitment to Nikios and cleansing himself from the subtlety of sin in the pasuk in Tehillim, where he says, Erdof ovai v'asigem v'lo ashuv. Allow me to pursue my foes and overtake them. Do not let me return until they are destroyed. Something that Yehoshaphat, Asa, and Chizkiyahu, who were also righteous kings, did not consider themselves worthy to ask, because they were not so cleansed of these sins as was David HaMelech. In other words, what the Zohar is telling us is that David worked so hard to refine himself and to make sure that he was free of even the most subtle, nuanced level of these sins, that he felt that he could ask Hashem, let me overtake my enemies and let them be destroyed, and let me not return until they were destroyed. You can't ask Hashem that unless you know that you're clean, clean as a squeaky clean. Yeah, Susie.
So the obvious question, if he had such a high level of Nikias, is how did he allow himself to fall into the relationship with Bathsheba?
Great question. And for that, I will refer you to my 3-part series on David and Bathsheba, which can be found on the L'chaim Center website. It's a phenomenal question, but I don't even want to attempt to answer the question. But what I do want to say is it's because of things like this that we learn about David HaMelech that we're forced to reconcile, right? On one hand, we hear about David HaMelech that he was practicing Nikios. He wasn't just a good kosher Jew who avoided sin. He was on the highest level, on the most subtle level. He had abolished and uprooted even the most nuanced level of sin from within him. But then we hear about David and Bathsheba. So that's why we have this conflict and this difficulty of understanding. That's where the conflict comes in. Like, I'm so confused. On one hand, I'm looking at this story of David and Bathsheba, and it looks to me like he's like, as the non-traditional approaches to David seem to try to paint him as being some kind of, misogynistic, philanderer of some sort. When the truth is, we're told by the Zohar, of all the people in the Tanakh that succeeded in uprooting even the most subtle level of sin, it's David. So how do we reconcile that? How does that make sense? It's a tremendous question. it's one that if you really want to understand David HaMelech, you need to address, and you can't ignore. But it's way, way, way. There's so many layers of understanding that of what happened there, and we do have a series on it. Let me just see if it's still there. Let me see if it's still there. Should be on the website. This is a good opportunity to plug the website over here. I hope everyone knows about the L'chaim Center website. So if you look over here where it says library, just click on library. And then you have all of the classes and all the lectures. So let's see, Adventures in Tanakh. So we have over here, Life of King David, David and Bathsheba, David and Bathsheba continued. See that? Mm-hmm. There's tons and tons and tons of classes on the website. So take a look over there and enjoy it. It was one of my favorite series that we did because it was super challenging and fun to get into. Okay, fine. Let's go a little bit further. So Ramchal now shows how the sage's understanding of David HaMelech's request is indicated in the words of David himself. Let's see if we can just get to the end of this chapter. So, and this is what he himself stated in the course of his words of prayer in that psalm. Hashem, please recompense me according to my righteousness. Repay me in a way befitting of the purity of my hands. And he said further in that psalm, Hashem repaid me in accordance with my righteousness, according to the purity of my hands before his eyes. This purity of hands, which David speaks of, is the purity and cleanliness that we have discussed in this chapter. So when David says over and over again, he uses this phrase, where's the phrase exactly? Hanikayon. He uses this phrase, Kevor Yadi Ashivli, with the righteousness of my hands. This is the purity of hands that we've been discussing, is this very, very concept of cleanliness, of nikius. And he goes on to say further, for with you I smash a troop, and with my God I leap over a wall. Allow me to pursue my foes and overtake them. Do not let me return until they are destroyed. Thus we see from the psalm itself that David HaMelech makes his unique request in the merit of his nikius. Because I practiced nikius, because I didn't just settle for being an overall good person and keeping the Torah and mitzvos on a base level, but I went deeper and more refined, and I took it to a granular level, and I refined my actions to the level of nikius. Because of that, I feel like I have the right to ask of you, Hashem, to be able to overtake my enemies. Okay, now Ramchal also proves from David HaMelech's own words another assertion made above. David HaMelech says further, who may ascend on the mountain of Hashem? Who may stand in the place of his sanctity? One with clean hands and a pure heart. Thus, David HaMelech himself essentially says here what was asserted earlier. Only one who is completely cleansed from every trace of sin and iniquity is the one who is suited to see the presence of Hashem. So if you really want to be in the presence of Hashem on the highest level that you can, and to reach that potential that we all have as human beings with a godly soul, nikius. We have to work on nikius. We can't be satisfied with, I'm a pretty good guy. I'm not a ganav. I don't cheat on my wife. I don't eat on Yom Kippur. I'm a good guy. I'm a good Jew. No, we gotta step it up. And wherever I'm at, take it to another level. David HaMelech also implies here that attaining Nikias is no small accomplishment. Okay, lest you think for a second that we're talking about easy stuff over here. So in truth, surely this trait is difficult to acquire. For the nature of man is weak, and his heart is easily swayed by the allure of physicality. And he permits for himself the things for which he can find sufficient grounds to be misled into believing them to be permissible, meaning we rationalize, we justify our behavior. Surely one who has attained perfection in this trait has already reached a lofty spiritual level, for he has stood in the face of a powerful battle and prevailed, meaning he's worked on the previous traits. He's worked on the Kiyas. He's worked on Zrizus. He's worked on Zehirus. Okay, he's already like in the 99th percentile over here. Okay, but nonetheless, he wants to take it one more level. Now that we've explained the general outline of Nikios, we will proceed in the following chapter to clarify the details of this trait. Okay, and then he's going to go in, starting in chapter 11, he's going to talk about those three things that we talked about: theft, illicit relations, and forbidden foods. Okay, two of the three. And he's going to go in to show you what Nikias looks like in those three areas. What does Nikias look like when it comes to theft? What does Nikias look like when it comes to immorality? And what does Nikias look like when it comes to kosher? Okay, so he's going to apply the principle of Nikias to these three areas of life. And we'll start that, God willing, next week. Okay, any questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah, Susie.
You just said that only one who merits being in the presence of Hashem is one who has Nikias. But we've learned that there's only 4 people in the world who have been sinless. And there have been very, very righteous people that have sinned, like Moshe Rabbeinu. And, we can find sins in many of the, they weren't perfect. They were phenomenal, but they weren't perfect. So how do you reconcile those two things? What does it mean to be in the presence of Hashem?
Presence of Hashem is not a one level place. It's a infinite level of degrees, right? You could be in the you can be in the presence of Hashem, and you can be more in the presence of Hashem, and you can be more in the presence of Hashem. So it's a matter of degree. To the degree that I am working on Nikias, to the degree that I'm taking my avodas Hashem, my service of Hashem, to a deeper place, and I'm being more careful and more precise, and I'm functioning on a spiritually on a higher level. To that degree, at the same, in a direct correlation, my exposure to the presence of Hashem grows. I'm more able to connect to Hashem. I'm more able to be in Hashem's presence. But you're right. There's only a very few people that can say that they left this world without sinless, and that's not, really a goal for us mere mortals. Our goal is just to be working on Nikias and to not rest on the laurels of what we've achieved and accomplished spiritually until now, but to always be trying to bring it to another level and to, get better and in different areas. And to the degree that we're doing that, we're leaving more, we're opening more opportunities for Hashem's light to come into us.
Thank you. Great.
Okay. All right. If that's it, we're going to pause here and we will pick it up from here next week, God willing. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tov, everybody.
Tov. Laila Tov, Rabbi.
Laila Tov, Yom Tov, Shavua Tov. Everything Tov. That's all. Just Tov.
All right.
Thank you.
Alan Weiss, I'll I'll call you in a minute, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Who's the younger gentleman on the couch at L'Chaim Center struggling to get up?
All right. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, did you book your tickets yet to Barcelona?
Well, I have not, because it's a very bad week, because Yosef has 4 schools that we're trying to get him into. And the first 2 weeks of February is when all of his interviews and open houses and everything are taking place. And we don't have the exact dates yet, but we're waiting, hoping that we're going to get like a little window, you know, in that sweet spot of like between the 10th and the 12th or whatever. But it's iffy. It's definitely iffy.
All right.
Iffy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be there the 11th.
Right. So it's basically
Paris. We're in Paris, like I think the 15th.
Yeah. That 1 week. Okay.
You can come to Paris.
It's
We
Shabbos.
would come either way. We would come to Barcelona or Paris. Just if we literally get 2 days where he has 2 consecutive days that we know for sure that he doesn't have an interview or a school, you know, an open house at one of those schools, we would come for sure. But right now, we don't know exactly when they are. I know he's got one on the 9th, 1 before. So.
Oh, shoot.
What?
I wanted to tell that story on the class.
Oh, that's it.
So do you remember Yarden?
Yeah, of course. He gave a kidney to a stranger.
Yeah. So listen to this. So did you know he started a charity? Did you know that?
Yeah, his friend's sister or something that she was beaten. She was abused.
His sister-in-law, his wife's sister, got killed by her husband.
Wife's sister-in-law. Yeah.
And when he was there donating a kidney, his wife was, I think, walking in the lobby maybe, and they had this event where they put up dresses of women who've been killed because of domestic violence. And they had the dresses of the women that gotten killed, and they'd like put them up in a display to bring awareness about it. And somebody came up to his wife and they said, you know, I remember you.
Came up to him.
His wife.
Oh, okay.
And said, you know, I remember you. Your sister's dress is up over here.
Wait, what?
So the day he's going in to donate the kidney at the hospital, they had a display to bring awareness for domestic violence. And they had the dresses of a number of women who had been killed because of domestic violence on display. And when his wife was walking in the hospital, the lady who did it recognized her and said, you know, your sister's dress is over here.
Oh my gosh.
Like on the he's going to donate the kidney, that's when they had the display there. So he said, you know, he definitely felt like his sister-in-law was there and watching.
Wow, that is crazy.
Isn't that?
You spoke with him?
Yeah, I talked to him last night.
Wow. How's he doing? Is he home?
Yeah, he's doing good.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. All right, fine. Okay, I gotta go eat something. Yosef has made some dinner. Hi, Pops. Well, we're gonna speak in an hour, right, Pops? Father? Wow.
I bet you're on mute.
Dad. Hello, vegan. The funny thing is, he doesn't even know we're watching him.
I know. Alan.
He can't see us.
Is he on the phone?
Yeah. It's funny.
I'll call in and tell him we're trying to.
Wow. Wait, I hear him.
Yeah. When I was 25, I had a herniated disc.
I'm turning myself. I don't want to hear.
You don't want to hear this. How I heard you exist at 25
before they did. So forget that, because
all right.
now.